Ladies and gents, welcome back. We do this once a week. I'm just going to cut right to it. Marty, welcome back. This is going to be, we're going to have a whole week off of this. You're going to be disappearing for a little while at 10 days, you were just saying before we hit record.
Yep.
Packing out with, 5 pounds of food and 10 days and low calories.
A little more than that. Maybe we'll talk about that at the end. But
okay.
Yeah, what a gong show, hilarious day this was.
It was, and we were expecting this to be the thing when you get back to be all shocked of all the things that happened, but it's all today, and we have all the things to talk about now.
I mean, I've told you this before. I don't know what I wake up in the morning pretty early. You do too. I'll grab a cup of coffee and then sit down and just look at what's going on in the Twitterverse. And this morning, to be honest, this morning looked pretty quiet. So I was digging into the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report, like boring, but that's what I was looking at. And then checking the stock market. And then all of a sudden, I get lit up and people are like, did you hear, Trudeau is breaking up with his girlfriend or his wife. And then it just went silly from there. So yeah, that's the kind of day today was. A silly day.
So that's the big story of the day, everybody. That's listening in now. Of course, Trudeau and Sophie are done. This is the news. They put this out there. Now there's a lot of hot takes out there, and I gave mine, and it got a lot of pushback. So I wanted to give Marty the first go at this one live in the show here, not just reading this ahead of time. But I said hot take. Yeah. People shouldn't relish in the fact that Trudeau's marriage is splitting up after 18 years. Family is an important institution, one that's routinely attacked by the left. This should be seen as just one more example of how Trudeau does not see through his commitments.
I can't disagree there. I think personally I was a little more cruel. A
lot of people were more cruel, and this is where a lot of people said, "Why are you giving him sympathy?" I'm not going to give him. I didn't say sympathy in my tweet.
I actually posted I posted a survey on that today, a poll asking people, does Trudeau deserve sympathy? And the number is pretty. Oh, okay, there you got it. I mean, people are saying no. So let's break it down. Yes, I've been married for 25 years. You're married. I have a family, children, and it's something I'm very proud of. And it's a lot of work.
17 years, almost as long as Trudeau now for myself.
Yeah, and we both have friends who have gone through divorces, and it's a terrible thing. And and family, I agree, is important, and I don't wish that on anyone. So that's a fact. In most circumstances, somebody getting divorced is not something I'm celebrating, and I'm not celebrating this. I'm not saying good for you, Trudeau, for getting divorced. I'm not celebrating it, but he doesn't get a lot of sympathy from me for that hardship, because I think he's put a lot of people through some pretty important hardships, and he hasn't shown a lot of remorse for what he's done. So pragmatically speaking, I don't have sympathy for him. I really don't.
My thought behind this whole thing was the idea that usually when something like this happens to somebody, there's a vitriolic group of people, like the woke people out there, that gets very awful. And I just didn't want to see that from people on our side. I didn't want to see the awful people that come out and they relish in other people's pain. They have this schadenfreude sort of complex where they really feel like a sense of joy at other people's misery, and I didn't want to portray that, and I wanted to just say something along those lines, like we shouldn't relish in other people's agony, but that being said, there's a real important thing to look at here and that is, if we're gonna say that we support the institution of marriage, the institution of the family, let's not be excited when it falls apart for somebody else at the same time. And let's actually push for good families. And yeah, of course, I don't think he's a good person. He doesn't deserve any sympathy.
I mean, Trudeau's made us feel and he's making Canadians boil over. Back to what I said earlier. Thinking about it, I've never been happy about anybody getting divorced ever. But then I wouldn't fight it. in his case, I was pretty content to say, nothing too negative about it. Like, he's getting divorced, so be it. But people started making all sorts of defending him, and then I'm rambling. He brings out the worst in people. He brings out the worst in people, and Canadians are fed up. Let's just go there. Canadians are fed up, and today you saw a lot of Canadians venting. Today was a bit of an ugly day on the internet that way. People were wishing him, including me. I was saying no sympathy from me. Will I think that way tomorrow or the day after? Probably not. Today was a day of venting, is what it was.
Yeah, that's a fair way of putting it. I wanted to take a hard-nosed stance because I grew up in a family. I was fortunate to be the youngest of 8 kids, and I got to see all the interpersonal mistakes of lots of people in my family, and I got to live vicariously through that. And I made good choices, I think, in my life. And 17 years married, I'm very fortunate for that, of course, and I just really wanted to push that, because I think there's been a lot of attacks on the institutions that hold our society together, especially at the smallest levels, at the most micro levels in society. And I really wanted to put my focus on that. I see people saw that as sympathy. I don't want it to be seen as that.
But I like was it you? Yeah, you're the one who made sort of the little quip at the end saying it just shows that he doesn't. It's another thing that he hasn't finished. Was it you?
Yeah, I said that. It just goes to show that this is another move of a man who never follows through with commitments.
Yeah. Now let's talk about what people ask, why now? I mean, between you and me, I mean, I'd heard rumors, pretty sound rumors.
For years.
I had a role where I had, in some of my senior roles, I did have people working for me that were experts in government relations. I mean, we had to do some lobbying and stuff like that. So I have in my Rolodex of friends, people who still work in government. And some of them had told me and I had no reason not to believe them, that the Trudeaus had been separated for, probably 3 or 4 years now, since after the trip to India fiasco. And so why the announcement today? That was the interesting question. Why the announcement today? So as political commentators, do you have a theory as to why it came out today? Because I do too. I have one, but I'd like to hear yours.
Well, I think there's a lot of news that's coming out from Trudeau's camp, absolutely. But of course, as you alluded to, there's been the rumor mill. There's obviously this one's floating around where they don't seem very happy. It's all kind of an act that's been put on. It's nothing new to everybody else to see that this is kind of what was going on. But looking for an expedient time when you can drop the news to get rid of another story. Now, right now, the Conservatives have been getting massive amounts of donations, surpassing the Liberals massively. I believe it was close to $8 million. That's it.
Yeah, the quarterly report went out today or yesterday, a couple of days ago.
That's right.
There you go. You got it.
So support for the Conservatives is massive. And what I alluded to in my video talking about this was the fact that this isn't just private donors. Like, what you really need to understand here is the corporate Canada and all of these entities that normally push behind governments. They're ditching the Liberals. They're leaving, and they're starting to put their money behind the Conservatives, because they know this is the direction that the government is going. So they want to get their tentacles in there as soon as possible. So it's not just that the Canadian public are seeing the shift away from Trudeau, away from the Liberals. It's all around. The marketplace is looking at it this way.
And you and I last week talked about this, in after the shuffle of the cabinet, we talked about whether it was getting ready for an election or not. We were kind of on the same page, not entirely on the same page, but reading the comments of your viewers afterwards, almost 90% of them said, no, there's no election. Why would Trudeau voluntarily subject himself to an election now.
Mm-hmm.
But in light of these events, in light of last week, in light of this, in light of the stock market, in light of the future pain that's coming down the path, in light of what I was reading this morning in the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report, in light of the donations, in light of all those things, I think it's out of Trudeau's control, and there will be an election, and they're cleaning house. I'm really starting to believe now that there's going to be an election in the next, before the end of the year. I'm settling in on that.
Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting you to go that way with it.
No, I'm settling in on that because first of all, I'm going with statistics. So we're 2 years into a minority government, and historically, minority governments never last much more than 2 years. At some point, a minority government is frozen. Now, this one's not frozen because he has
the coalition,
the support of the coalition, but the coalition's getting pretty fragile, and no matter what, he won't be able to pass all the laws that he wants. And the people that are controlling, the real controllers, probably want something. So it's just statistically, we're 2 years into a minority government, and it's unsustainable, and it rarely goes beyond 2 years. And I think there is just so much bad news that's going to come. I mean, we saw we'll talk about it, but there was a credit downgrading in the U.S.,
mm-hmm.
which had an immediate impact on the Canadian oil price and the Canadian dollar and the Canadian stock market.
Yeah.
We got interest rates that are going up. We just have so much bad news coming down the pipe. This is summer. It's summer. It's normally a quiet time. So normally there's these bad news that comes out in the summer. And I think this was part of that. Did they want it to come out the way it did today? Probably not. Did something happen to Trudeau's wife, Sophie? I mean, bring up the picture for the viewers. Like, Trudeau shows up at a press conference yesterday with a big giant Band-Aid in the middle of his forehead.
I don't have that one loaded up just right now. But.
Yeah. So now, and a day later, everybody's like, oh, okay. So the excuse they told us is he's playing with his kids, and he stumbled and he banged his forehead. I mean, bad enough that he had to put this big giant Band-Aid on his forehead and not cancel events. Some people are saying, no, she threw a coffee mug at his forehead.
Well, I think he couldn't cancel the events because he's on the defense right now, and this is why he's running hits against Pierre Poilievre. And Pierre Poilievre finally had a good showing, and I was talking about this in a video this morning. He finally is coming out and he's just talking about the things that people want to be talked about. He's talking about the economy. He's talking about housing. He's talking about all these things. He's not apologizing for stuff that the left media wants him to apologize for. He's actually he's
not taking the bait. He's doing his thing.
He's doing his thing. And Trudeau is running shot on him, saying, oh, he's drumming up anger and all this stuff, and it's failing miserably.
It's totally Yeah, and then Trudeau, cleans out his cabinet, hopes to sweep a few bad apples under the rug, and then hoping that he's got some fresh blood that'll garner some positive attention. And then he has this absolute brutal faux pas by Freeland earlier this week, who does the disingenuous comment that she doesn't own a car because she lives in Toronto and she walks everywhere.
She's trying to ham up the green thing. She's trying to ham up the climate change agenda that they're pushing forward.
And rather than just ignore that, people they double down on. Well, I guess that comment was so disingenuous that people decided to investigate. Sheila Gunn of the Rebel investigated and found all these expenses. Yeah, BlackRock did too. She's got a chauffeur. They're cross-referencing it with all the trips and so forth.
Yeah.
So then Trudeau comes out to her defense and does this most bizarre, which is how I started my day. Trudeau does this most bizarre photo op propaganda thing.
What is
Trudeau.
That? What is that?
Yeah, let's break that down for the viewers. This is supposedly a train or a rail car in Toronto. So Trudeau takes the rail car. We've talked on the news.
It looks like the subway,
it's either a subway or a bus. I'd say it's a bus because of the light outside the window, but it's either or, right?
Oh, okay.
Well, actually, it is probably a subway because there was scenes of him going down underground through the stairs.
Oh, and the subway does come up above ground, I think, around High Park.
So.
In Toronto.
but then when you count in there, there's 6. So he's doing it to do 2 things, I'm guessing. One is 3 things. Hey, I'm a man of the people. Sure. B, yeah, Chrystia Freeland's not the only one who walks to work or takes the train. I'm a man of the person. I take the train like everybody else. And what's the third thing he's trying to do out of this? Taking the train is safe because we all know the controversy, right. Not the controversy. I mean, everybody's scared, and the crime in the cities is out of control. So he's trying to do 2-3 things within one shot. I look at that, and so does the general public. We see 6 guys with vests. We know that's the security detail, and people that are vetted, and all the signs that you normally see on the train, all the advertising, it's all been stripped. And it's a photo op. It's a really bad photo op.
I didn't even get the advertising part. Yeah, you nailed that with that. Absolutely. That's a thing.
Everybody in this picture is vetted, right? They're either security or they're vetted. I mean, we know that it's the new weird uniform of Trudeau's Secret Service guys. They got this vest, the gun's probably in there or whatever.
Right.
I think the only 2 or 3, like you can count 6 in that picture, and there are other pictures that went along with it.
And for someone who's so happy to be on the TTC and it's safe there, he's got a pretty solemn look on his face. But it reminds me of the most interesting man on the earth, right? I don't always travel the TTC, but when I do, I come with bodyguards and a cameraman.
Did you see my meme? I made a meme of this one. I don't know if you found my meme, but I made a meme that it basically it said, I don't always travel with commoners, but when I do, I make sure I bring 6 security guards and a photographer.
Well,
that's what he's doing in this. Yes, absolutely. So this was early this morning, which is Trudeau trying to, go on the offensive and put his positive spin, and then he got sidetracked by
mockery,
his wife.
Though. The mockery immediately. Yeah.
This is garbage propaganda. I mean, this is Canadians are beyond this. We're I shouldn't say that. It's a legit question. Do you think there are people who believe this?
I think there are.
I think there are. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually believe that there are, and it's sad. It's sad to know that that's a fact. But it's the world we're living in now.
I mean, as soon as I saw this, it reminded me of Catherine McKenna a couple of years ago. She posted a video where she walked to work in snowshoes from her house in Ottawa, and there was like about 2 inches of snow on the ground. Like, come on, and then, God bless him. I mean, he was a fantastic gentleman. It was Jack Layton, a great leader, and an NDP. Didn't see eye to eye, but Jack had a faux pas too. I mean, you might not remember this, but Jack got caught in a similar thing. Jack had a car, his chauffeur stopped, he got out of the car, and then he jumped on a bicycle that was waiting for him 500 yards from Parliament, and then he rode his bike to Parliament. Well, somebody caught him doing that. So it's like, Jack, like you wreck your credibility. And he was a really great guy, and for somebody to convince him to do something like that. Trudeau, I don't put it beyond him. I mean, this is garbage propaganda.
Well,
Trudeau.
That's actually a good point to why these politicians need to stop listening to their staff. Like, actually just be genuine people. And this is my argument against Pierre Poilievre and sometimes even Danielle Smith. Just going along with what the staff say, make your apology, just do the thing, and it'll all go over well for you. It's like, no, you haven't been running good strategies. On the federal side of the Conservative Party, they didn't do well with Andrew Scheer. They didn't do well with O'Toole. Why is Pierre Poilievre listening to them? He's doing well on his own. He got to the leadership position on his own. I think some of these people that are making decisions for him are doing a really terrible job.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So look at how long we talked about Trudeau. So Trudeau was a distraction today.
Yeah.
I think that I don't think he wanted this to come out quite the way it did. I think maybe Sophie preempted him and did it, although I imagine somebody manages her accounts. But what's going to be interesting is if they try and put a positive spin on this in the coming days. I mean, I've seen everything. I've seen people say that they're going to spin this as Trudeau worked so hard that on behalf of Canadians that it ruined his marriage, and that's how dedicated he is to Canadians. And back to your point, I'd be like, no.
If he can't hold the marriage together, he can't hold the country together. That's
a man should be dedicated. And if your job is getting in the way of your life, then make the proper decision and look after your wife and your kids kids and leave the job behind.
Absolutely.
So I don't have respect for that line of that argument wouldn't hold with me anyways.
It's not a strong position at all. I don't
Let's
agree
move on. I'm looking at my face. I'm looking angry. Let's move on past Trudeau. He's annoying.
Okay, so there was a ruling in Alberta recently. A judge ruled that the COVID measures that took place there, that Hinshaw put in Alberta, they were unruly, they were unlawful, and it seems like it was mainly on a technicality that this became the ruling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those very narrow cases where a group of basically churchgoers. Let me step back, right? So Alberta was no different than most jurisdictions. We passed all sorts of mandates during COVID, banning family gatherings, closing down churches, shutting down restaurants, whatever. So a very specific group launched a lawsuit against Alberta's chief medical officer. It was basically a church group saying that their rights had been violated because of the mandates. Mm-hmm. So the judge looked at the regulations in a very, 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 very narrow way. And in fact, it's like the 3-pager was the ruling. And the ruling basically said that that the chief medical officer had the right to pass those mandates, but that those mandates were incorrectly passed because they were actually recommended by the chief medical officer, but then passed by the elected body, by the cabinet, by the premier's office. So in a very, very narrow technical sense, the judge said the people who passed the mandates didn't follow the letter of the law. So the judge didn't rule on whether the mandates were legal or constitutional, or it didn't. I don't think it went deep enough.
It's almost like he found a way out of making a proper judgment on the thing.
He made a proper judgment on what he was asked. I mean, that's a risk with lawyers. They make a case, and then the judge in some cases can rule very narrowly. Like, did I go, are you allowed to post the limit as 80? And the rule is, well, yes, he's allowed to post the speed as 80 because he's whatever, the engineer. Should the engineer post the rules? Is 80 the right speed? Those questions don't get answered. The judge simply answered the question, was Hinshaw legally allowed to make mandates? And the answer is yes, she was allowed to make mandates based on the Health Act of Alberta. But the way the mandates were put into place was done incorrectly because it was done with the approval of the cabinet. So anyways, some people, it is a victory in a sense, because for me, it's a victory because it means that no matter what, laws get tested and there are judges that can arbitrate and things can be changed. What I don't like about it is that, I don't like the narrowness, but that's fine. But I don't like the fact that it takes 3 years for something like this. I mean, to me,
that's ridiculous.
That church group probably screamed bloody, that their rights were being violated. And we always get told that, well, then let the judge decide. Subjecting yourself to the courts, getting arrested or getting fined or agreeing to what's going on, and then having to wait 3 years for your day in court. I'm not happy about that.
Well, I think that if things are enacted and measures are put in place under the idea of an emergency and under the auspices of, or the concept of urgency, that we have to have this urgently, we need to put it in. I think we should have the same vigor and the same urgency in the legislative or the judicial side of it on ruling whether or not it was legal. But instead, we go through this very, very slow process. And just like in the other cases where, Brian Peckford's case to go against the government, federal government, on their restrictions of travel, it took way too long. And by the time it got in, they pulled it. The day before.
They called it moot.
And then they called it moot.
Yeah.
And I think it's ridiculous. I think it's injustice when that happens. It
is a form. Yes, it is an injustice because, and it's a denial of your rights. I mean, when people say, what rights have we lost? I have, that's an example I bring up. I do have a right to fair trial and due process. But if the process takes too long, then you're in a way depriving me. Well, you are not in a way, you are depriving me of a key right. And to some, you made me think of something. Yes, if something that, if a mandate gets challenged right away and it's a big piece of legislature in the middle of a pandemic, that one should make it to the top of the list of the courts. I'm sure there's a whole, like, the courts were using the excuse during COVID that they were overwhelmed with other cases and stuff like that. It's like, you know what? Get rid of all the red light tickets for a month and then make room for the courts to adjudicate on a key matter like whether the mandates are legal or not.
Yes. But
yeah,
I mean, you ask, like, people ask, what rights have you lost? Well, I'd ask, well, what rights do you have if they can just be in an emergency taken away from you? Or do you have fundamental rights if they can be just pulled arbitrarily away and then you have to fight through the court system to see if you actually have them or not?
Unfortunately, Canada, in the new constitution and in each provincial constitution, we have this notwithstanding clause, which basically means that anything above it is the government can pass the notwithstanding clause and trample on any right in this country.
Yeah.
And I talked about this. We don't have the same lawmaking as the Americans do.
That's right.
They have a brilliant constitution and piece of paper that really protects them. We saw through COVID that piece of paper we call our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, sorry to be crude, but it's basically toilet paper at this point.
Well, it is because the idea behind it, especially with the notwithstanding clause being the final say in that, is that, your freedom of speech, travel, all these things, they're there. And the only time that they really ever need to be protected is when the government wants to limit that from you. But they can use the notwithstanding clause as soon as you protest against it. So it renders all of it moot. It renders the entire document worthless.
Well, now you're reminding me of another Trudeau quote, where Trudeau was literally quoted as saying, "Oh, protest is okay as long as you're not protesting government rules." Like, really? That's
the whole point of protesting.
That's the whole point of protesting.
Unless you're in China, because in China you see protests against Japan and things like that, where it's like allowed protest. You're allowed to protest against stuff that is never going to make any change in China.
Yeah, for Trudeau, I'm allowed to protest the NBA and I'm allowed to protest the way McDonald's cooks my fries, but I'm not allowed to criticize him. Yeah, I got it. Right. Well, by the way, I went to McDonald's. I went to McDonald's today. I don't go to McDonald's very often, man. Like, it was like $12.99 for a Big Mac combo. Holy smokes!
Not kidding. The same thing happened for me on the weekend. I was out of town and I went through a McDonald's drive-through, and I got one of the quarter pounder with BLT.
Yeah.
I was like, I just want the sandwich. That's all.
Yeah.
Oh, are you sure? Yeah. That'll be like almost $12.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I've done that. I've asked them. I'm like, wait, did you just double my order? I only want one.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. It was 20, I don't know, 24, 23 for two of us for like, it's a Big Mac. It's about this big, a little bit of fries and a soft drink for $24. Holy smokes. Anyways, wow. I digress.
But that has a lot to do with the economy. That's a great segue into the next thing.
Yeah.
So recently the U.S. credit was downgraded from its AAA status that it's virtually always been. I mean, I don't remember a time ever where the U.S. didn't have a AAA rating for its borrowing, its ability to borrow. But now they've been downgraded to a AA status. And this calls into question. This is a big thing that, I've been a big fan of Peter Schiff. I've listened to him for a long time, since about 2008, when he was so right with the predictions on what went down with the housing, the subprime mortgage crisis down in the United States, which we did fairly well during that whole time because we had good fiscal policy, thanks to Stephen Harper. Many people maybe aren't fans of his other policies, but at least when it comes to fiscal policy, he was spot on, and it really saved us from having a lot of heartache during that time. But now, what Peter Schiff has been saying since then is we're now moving into a monetary crisis, and they keep every 6 months or so going before Congress and saying we need to raise the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
We need to raise the debt ceiling because we need to borrow more money. We have more debt to pay back, and we need to borrow it so we can pay back all these debts and all this expenditure that we're doing, just as the Canadian government's doing. But there will come a point in time when you can raise the debt ceiling all you like, but you won't be able to borrow it because the lenders won't lend it to you. And this is where we're kind of getting closer to at this point with a downgrade. Not that AA isn't like a great rating, but it sure isn't the top economy in the world rating of AAA.
Actually, yeah, very good. A couple of points. It's actually how I started my morning today. I was more interested in that than the Trudeau stuff this morning, because when I started this morning, and I looked at the stock market in Canada took a shit kicking today, dropped about 2.5%. And then here in Alberta, specifically, the oil stocks were just hammered and the price of oil went down. And then when I, dig into it, I learn about the downgrade and other things. Mm-hmm. And then it just reminds me, you and the viewers of what we talked before. There's pain coming for Canadians, and it's not just stuff that we do to ourselves. I mean, we're next door to a huge powerhouse, and if they start to hurt, we subsequently hurt. But the other thing I want to say is what's going on in the US is going on in Canada. I mean, what I was doing this morning is weird, but I was reading the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report. I mean, they released a report on Friday, which is a critique of their own budget. So they critiqued the budget, but now they're critiquing the critique of the budget. It's a report on the fiscal health of the country, and it's fascinating because in there they do all these forecasts. They go out as far as 2097, so they're going out 75 years into the future into their forecast, and then they're forecasting things like 2% GDP growth. They're forecasting beautiful growth of the provinces. They even forecasting 3% productivity increase per citizen. Like when you read the report and you saw this, it was so rosy. It was like, it's
a bit like a climate model. It seems like it's there on the other side of it. It's doom and gloom, but it never ever happens. If you could find my
tweet on that subject this morning, they literally have a trend that shows the impact of climate change on GDP all the way out to 2097. And there's no improvement in GDP. In fact, there's a negative impact of climate change all the way to 2097. So my tweet this morning was, well, obviously the carbon tax and whatever else you're collecting doesn't work, because if there's some improvement in climate change, you definitely forgot to tell the Parliamentary Budget Office, because they're still carrying this huge negative impact to the GDP. They figure in their predictions, they got climate change as costing the GDP 3% out into the future. Boring topic for most of the people here, but
it's very interesting for me. I'm very interested
and
what
you and
goes
I.
on.
I made a link in there, and
I really think that Canadians are really tuning into this, because people don't like economics. It's boring. What do you want to talk about that for? Until we have an economic downturn, and then everybody wants to be talking about it. Everybody wants to know what's going on, what's going to happen next, what's going to be the thing. And guys like me, I've been saying we're going in the wrong direction for years. I've been telling people this, for years. People are like, whatever, housing prices are going crazy, they're going way up. This isn't gonna, it's not going to happen forever. It's not going to last. We can't have this. And now people are starting to say, oh, Clyde, what's going to happen next? And I have no good story to tell, unfortunately, because this is not the first time that things like this have happened. You can extrapolate from other situations and where things have occurred like this.
Let's bring it back to Stephen Harper real quick. And, Harper did warn us in 2015 that Trudeau's little deficits would be huge, right?
Yes.
And he was bang on that. In the report this morning, it clearly states that the federal government right now has no plan to balance the budget until 2035. So we're still in their paperwork. They're going in huge debt until 2035, which you and I know we can't do it. It won't balance. That's what they're saying. They're saying something to put it on paper. And even if they did balance in 2035, between now and 2035, which is 12 years from now, The debt servicing alone on our debt is $40 billion a year. So between now and 2035, we're going to accumulate another $450 billion just in debt, pay in debt servicing. Our debt's already at $2 trillion. I'm bringing this back because now you're making me think. The U.S. asking about, increasing their debt ceiling. We're almost there too. But we're making these bullshit predictions, saying that GDP is going to keep growing and so forth to justify borrowing more money. I agree. We can tell ourselves internally. We're fudging the numbers internally. Hopefully when the government shows up at the banker saying, I need another, $1 trillion, somebody will finally say no. But right now,
where it's going to go.
There seems to be somebody willing, like we're bad credit, but people are willing to lend us money.
That's the thing. When it comes to a liberal government like this, they're just going to keep going to the trough until the trough runs dry. And that's the problem. And it puts us in a precarious situation because what is going to be the big hit? It's not really just isolated to one particular market anymore. We're actually in what could be seen as a currency crisis. If they keep inflating the way they're going, what they formerly used to call stagflation, where you have low savings in the marketplace, you have low savings amongst the populace. So there's high interest rates, and yet there's high inflation at the same time. This can't continue. And if they keep printing money, which the Bank of Canada denies that they're doing, we just issue new credits. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You're just not physically printing it through the mint. You're issuing new credits. It dilutes the currency. That's the inflation. That's the inflation. What we're doing is measuring the effects of inflation after the fact and then fudging the numbers to make it sound all rosy. But at the end of the day, we could end up in a situation like Zimbabwe, like Weimar Germany, where Weimar Germany did exactly this. They were given a tremendous debt and they paid it off by issuing new currency, flooding the market with new money, leaving everybody's money worthless.
Who had the highest hyperinflation? Was it Germany or was it Zimbabwe? One country at one point had like this crazy. I mean, when we talk hyperinflation,
Zimbabwe had a $1 trillion bill note, and it was worth like
$1 trillion bill. Yeah. So people, is that the old images of people with wheelbarrows full of cash that meant nothing?
Yes.
Oh my God. Yeah. And then with these nobody walks around with money, so that's another way we're not aware of these things. I mean, people don't even have money in their wallets, because if you had to carry the bills, then the inflation would become perhaps more obvious to people. I mean, I'm surprised how people are catching on. I mean, I've seen my fair share of pictures lately of people putting a grocery basket of stuff and saying, hey, I paid $100 for that. Well, you posted that picture last week. That was a fabulous picture of the lady pushing the cart with the $20 of groceries, like
from the 1980s. Yeah, and it was full. It was just
20. Hang on, I'm just gonna reach behind me. $20 of groceries. Jeez.
If you got $20 worth, it's just like a bag of chips.
Well, almost right. So this is that I get out of focus here. This is my version of what I call a meal ready to eat. So when I go hiking, I ration my food. Yeah, I make my own MREs. I put my food in these Ziploc bags. This is a day's worth of ration, my breakfast and so forth. Anyways, I have 12 pounds of food for my 10-day trip. And the 12 pounds of food, which is garbage food, like it's processed food, right? It's oatmeals, it's Kraft Dinner, it's Knorr noodles, nothing healthy. And 12 pounds of food cost me $78. And so I'm eating garbage for 10 days, it's $7 a day. And I actually asked people, could you survive on $5 a day? And I don't think you could on $5 a day.
I don't think it's possible. No, I don't think it's possible.
Or if you did, it wouldn't be healthy, right? You'd be eating the Campbell's soups full of sodium, the Hungry Man stuff, a bunch of rice.
I would argue a lot of that stuff costs a lot more money. Like my wife and I are pretty prudent when it comes to our finances, and we eat a lot of rice, and we eat a lot of we have a lot of meat that we bought in bulk. So we buy like a half a cow or a quarter of a cow, a half a pig, and a whole lamb, kind of thing. So we save a lot of money that way. And I recommend people do that because it really, really helps out. And a lot of people are going to need that help moving forward. A lot of people just don't know how to take care of themselves, I find. And it's really unfortunate.
Well, and you know, and in the Canada Food Guide, they say you should eat healthy, and it's a fact that eating healthy is very expensive. It's almost impossible for people to eat very healthy, because if you try to go out and buy fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, pineapple, and stuff like that, it's very expensive.
It is.
Anyways, the point was just, you know, I just it's fresh in my mind. I come out of Walmart with one of those purple bins. It's $80 worth of food, and I'm stretching it because, you know, I'll be calorie deficient. I mean, there's barely 1,500 calories per day the way I ration it out, and it's $7. So yeah, Canadians are going to hurt. We talk about this every week. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen the worst of this yet. We haven't seen the worst, folks. And if the Americans next door are hurting, it hurts us. Like today was a classic day. I don't think anything fundamentally was bad with the Canadian stock market today, but it took a shit kicking because we're next door to the Americans. And when it goes bad for them, it goes bad for us. Sometimes we're lucky. We had Harper in the past, and he sheltered us a little bit. Who's going to shelter us when the shit hits the fan in the U.S.? Is Trudeau sheltering us?
No, absolutely not. He's leaving us vulnerable. No. Absolutely. And that's what we've been doing.
Oh,
but that's Canada this week. So we got hit with all that just today. You're not going to be here next week, so we're going to have a whole 10 days where you're not around in civilization, and you're going to be.
It's 10 days where I don't even have a cell phone, Clyde. Like I leave. I'm driving north tomorrow so that I can be at the trailhead. I'll sleep at the trailhead with my two buddies, and then we get going on Friday morning. And then we have 20-kilometer days, 10 of them. So I'll come out of the wilderness the 14th or the 15th. Don't come looking for me on the 14th. Get nervous on the 15th. If I'm not out on the 16th, then put my emergency plan into action and come look for me.
Fair enough.
And when I come out on the 14th or 15th, we'll do this. And I will do my best not to listen to any news driving home. We'll chat like this, and you can tell me. And boy, I have a feeling in 2 weeks from now, it's going to be better than comedy gold.
It's going to be better.
What's your prediction? Give me a prediction. What's a prediction that's going to happen in 2 weeks? What do you think is going to happen in the next 2 weeks? Something big.
Something big that's going to happen? I don't know if I have any predictions because so much craziness happened recently. I don't know when the next schedule for the Bank of Canada to make a credit interest rate hike is going to be. I don't think that's in the next little bit. My prediction for that one is actually a 50 basis. We're going to go, for the next one. That's my prediction anyway. I don't think they're going to go with just the 25, not with the budget and the way it's been going. But I don't know if that's happening in the next 10 days. I think.
Let's hope for the best. Let's hope nothing happens. You know what? Because I've had enough nasty surprise. Actually, this is an August hike. My second big trip annually is in September when I go hunting. That's the trip where when I come back from hunting in October, that's the one where in the last 15 years, I've had 6 or 7 really bad surprises coming out of hunting. You know, the financial crisis of 2008 and most, you know, often a lot of bad economic stuff happens in September, October, historically.
Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see for that because there's a lot of bad things that could happen, and the mortgage crisis in Canada is definitely going to be one. But Marty, where can people find you?
Marty Up North on YouTube and on Twitter.
All right. Links as always in the description down below. Thanks again for coming.
Cheers, everyone.